So here's a fun little project we can 3D print. This is an Anderson Powerpole distribution block that I found on Makerworld by Serial Hobbyist. And I figured why not bring you guys along, because I actually need a couple of these. So this is perfect. So we get 4 Anderson outputs, 1 input, and we even have a fuse in here. How cool is this? 3D printed. Took me on my Bamboo P1S about an hour and a half to print a red and a black. So naturally, I printed 2. So obviously, you will need to have access to a 3D printer for this, but I'll leave a link to the STL in the description. We'll need 5 red and black Anderson Powerpole housings. We're gonna need some of these blue female disconnects that I picked up from Ace Hardware. I'm gonna be using 14 gauge copper wire, and I'm going to use both 45 and 30 amp power poles, because that's how I'm gonna do it. And then various crimpers and stuff. So let's dive in. Oh, we're also gonna need 4, these are M3 by 16 screws and nuts. We also need some type of fuse. I'm going to use a 20 amp fuse. So the first thing we have to do is measure and cut our wire. And we're basically just going to measure them to these little ridges here. So this is the first connection for the input to the first power pole. So we'll just run it there and then kind of get in there with our cutters and cut. And then we'll need to make jumpers to each of the power poles. So once we make that first one, we can kind of just line them up and make 3 more. Just like that. Now for the red wire, we're going to be using these female disconnects as our fuse. So we're actually just going to measure the wire from right there to kind of the little groove there. So these 2 are going to be a little bit shorter. And we can measure 1 more for the female quick connect. All right. And then we just need a few jumpers. Now we get to work stripping all the black wires for our power poles. Now for the first power pole here, which is going to be the input, I'm going to use a 30 amp power pole. And then we'll use the 45 amp power poles for when we need to connect multiples into it. So then I'm going to twist the other wires together, and we're going to crimp in the 45 amps so we can make a good double connection there. And we will rinse and repeat. And then on the final one, we'll go back to using a 30 amp. Then we can go ahead and insert them into the black housings. There we go. Sometimes a little flathead screwdriver helps coax them along the way. And that side is done. Now we can work on the red wire. So we're going to start with the 2 shorter ones that we cut. And we're going to crimp on these females. Now here's the deal with these. These fit in just like that. But when we crimp these, it's going to deform this. So it's kind of a pain in the butt. You got to kind of force them. I initially tried this with the actual crimpers that are supposed to crimp this type of quick connect. But I found that just absolutely deformed it too much for it to go into the housing there. So had to do a bit of finagling, and we only want to crimp it towards the top. So I'm just using kind of one of these old school guys here, and I'm just going to crimp it right there at the top, okay? But as we'll notice, now it's kind of deformed and it doesn't fit in there. So I've used another set of crimpers here to kind of round this out. But I've found that just getting a lighter and kind of heating this a little bit. And you just got to kind of make it work to kind of heat shrink it a little bit, if you will. You got to kind of mess with it a little bit. And then now it'll actually go in there. And for this side, we will use a 30 amp power pole. And we'll do the exact same thing for here, but then we need to daisy chain them, so we'll use the 45 amp. So again, strip our wire, make our crimp, do our finagling. Oh, that one might actually fit a little better. Check for fit. That probably should be good. Now we can strip the rest of our red wires. And now we can continue to daisy chain these wires just as we did for the black side, using the 45 amps to connect multiple wires, and then we'll use a 30 amp at the end. Just like that. Now we can go ahead and insert all of the crimps into the power pole housings. Don't forget me. And now we can mate our power pole housings. I'm starting at the end with the 30 amp side. And then we'll have the black and the quick connect there. And now we can insert, starting on the black side there at the end, the power poles. Need to connect these guys though. Bring our quick connects around, kind of force them in there like so. And then the challenge is to get the cover on without everything popping out. There we are. And then finally, we can add our M3 by 16 nuts and bolts and tighten everything down. And finally, we insert our fuse into the fuse holder and we are done. But as a good ham radio operator doing electronic projects, we always want to check continuity, make sure everything's good. We can even do it on the other side. And that is a cool little 3D printed Anderson Powerpole distribution block.